Om Shanti. Good evening. Welcome to Raj Yoga Essentials interview with a Raj Yogi. Our topic this evening is the importance or the benefit of keeping a chart. And as usual, we'll start with a reflection. If I look honestly at where my attention is during the day, it's either on the actions I'm performing, on situations or people outside, or on the past and the future. In essence, it's out there. But when I embark on a path of self-transformation, I teach myself to bring my attention inward, to start to look at the self with an attitude to understand. Even as I sit here now, am I able to observe clearly all the thoughts my mind is creating? Do I clearly understand any feelings I might have? Can I trace the internal source of my thoughts and feelings? Learning to support myself in looking inwards on this journey of self-transformation. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Good evening. As Judy mentioned, tonight and next week's session is about creating a chart for self-benefit. And I remember quite early on in this study, I remember seeing one of the suggestions is that a chart is the first step to progress. And just even during the reflection, I was reminded of last Tuesday's session, introversion. There seems to be a connection between the two. So what's the difference in terms of what am I doing in this reflection? How is introversion connected to keeping a chart? Yeah, they definitely have a big connection. Introversion is really about withdrawing inwards, looking at my inner world. And that art of just being able to withdraw, because we have such a deep habit of going outwards. So just learning that basic skill. It's very interesting because with Raj Yoga, many come to learn meditation, and we try to explain that meditation is one of many tools or capacities that we use in the study of self-transformation. So this art of being able to turn inwards in itself is a skill to develop. And I want to blend that skill. Once I have that skill, I'm going to apply it to being able to assess myself relative to what we call the mirror of knowledge. And that's what the chart really is about. That I'm not going in just to see in a sort of unorganized way, but I have some definite signs and signals I'm looking at. I have an understanding that I'm using. So it's quite a specific way of looking at the self.
I think some look at it, they hear the word chart and may not actually know what that means. Maybe being in the study for so long, you kind of get used to the language sometimes. So, what does that actually mean? Is it a sort of like a physical thing, a chart, or is it more keeping a mental note?
Some keep a mental note. We think of it as keeping a physical record. And the two examples that are quite similar that I think people are familiar with that come to my mind when I hear the word chart is obviously the medical example. So when someone's in the hospital, they'll have a chart at the foot of their bed that shows their stats and condition, their status. And so as they're healing, then they have to keep this chart up. It's quite critical to know what stage of the healing they're at, what's going on. So that's very similar to what's happening. The other place I've seen souls using a chart, it's quite fascinating, is in fitness. So weightlifters will keep a chart. And I have never seen such meticulous charts. I think they rival medical charts that weightlifters will keep. They're very, very meticulous, again, because they really want to be aware of what their progress is, what they're doing. So those are great examples of this idea of charts. So we're keeping a spiritual chart, and I'm sure we'll explore what elements might be in that chart.
Certainly, when you were sharing, I was actually thinking about when I used to be in cancer research. And for those who have been, taken any science classes in university or high school, um, those experiments that you're asked to do feels very different from when you have to do something self-directed. I found that when I was asked to do something, I don't really know what I'm really doing. You're writing things down, but there's no sense of purpose. So, is there, in terms of charts, is there such an importance, do you feel, in the study to have a point, a purpose, a focus for my chart so it doesn't become something so disorganized?
I think that we've talked about before that we're on a journey where there is resistance, and that resistance has a variety of different ways of appearing. And one of the most interesting is almost a numbing effect, trying to remove or diminish a sense of meaningfulness or connection to the objective. And that can create, I don't want to use the word carelessness, but a lessening of interest in keeping a chart. The chart starts to feel meaningless or ritual or rote or a bunch of check boxes. And so I'm laughing because right now we have an initiative going on, and I have a very small part in it, but I landed up in a conversation. There was, I think, 4 of us on the phone, and so I was sort of a witness to this very interesting thinking through, because this initiative involves providing a chart, a daily chart for souls, some things to check and how to change. And at one point, and I saw the initial proposal that was given. It was very, very complicated, more complicated than what you're actually getting. It was very complicated. And so another member, the person who created it, was very meaningful to them. Another member in the conversation was saying, yes, we know it's meaningful to you, but a couple of things. It's going to defy translation, but also it may not be meaningful to other people because it's so deep. And they said, I remember them saying, I'm not a check the box kind of person. I can't do it. It needs to be meaningful to me. And I agree completely. That chart that they created was meaningful to them. The only thing we want to make sure the chart has to be meaningful. It could be one item or it could be quite a complicated process. Both are fantastic if it's meaningful to the user. And again, we want to make sure that it's reflecting the knowledge of Raj Yoga. I'm not just coming up with anything. It has to be connected to the objective or the different signals or indicators that the study of Raj Yoga provides us. So it's not arbitrary or my inclinations, but it's connected to the objective of the study, which hopefully I find meaningful as well.
Does one have to take in Raja Yoga to really benefit from that?
No, I think charts are pretty powerful in any, as I said, weightlifters use them. And the point is that when we embark on any process of of transformation, it could be physical, emotional, mental, relationship, financial, or in this case, spiritual, any process of self transformation, I need to have some sort of mechanism that allows me to see where I'm progressing, but also helps me to understand different things that come along and how to resolve or address them. So, the power of the chart.
We'll certainly touch on the elements of a chart, but one question that often comes up, or a comment up comes on, I don't need to write a chart. I can just keep a mental note, and that's probably true. What do you find is your experience? What perhaps a lot of experienced students have noticed if you just keep a mental note?
Mhm. It's fine to keep a mental note. With all of the disciplines in Raj Yoga, I remember coming to this study, and there are some interesting, very useful disciplines that we embrace. But what became clear to me in general, with respect to the disciplines, whether it's Raj Yoga or anywhere else, I know right now we're involved in a pandemic, and there's lots of guidelines we're given, or disciplines, you could call them. And what you start to see coming up, and this is the thing, is there is massive resistance to change. And that resistance to change is also going to resist any tools or resources that fuel that change. We need to know that. So I could be resisting a chart for very legitimate reasons, or I could be resisting a chart because of one reason only, and that's called arrogance. So that's something that I have to look at honestly. But I noticed with all of the different guidelines, whether it's pandemic restrictions or anything, it challenges the things that are stopping us from changing. The ego, the attachments, the fear, they're all challenged. So the chart's no different. It will challenge those elements in the self that are resisting change. So I just need to be honest about that piece. When I say I don't need to keep a physical chart, perhaps I don't. I just need to be honest. What's going on?
Can you clarify what you mean by arrogance? Because I know
Ego, yeah,
that is a word that's used in the study,
yeah.
but it's a broader term.
Yeah, in this respect, it's that sort of feeling of I know what I'm doing. I'm right. It's basically no change is going to happen. um, so it likes to rationalize a lot, and um, ego again, it doesn't like this idea of self-respect coming back. It really doesn't like it, and that is the cornerstone of Raj Yoga, is restoring self-respect. So it's ego is really deeply threatened by Raj Yoga and every part of it, because it's about restoring that self respect. So it's going to come up with really good rationalizations of why it doesn't, I don't need to do this, I don't need to do that. It is just, so I need to be, honesty is the antithesis of ego. They are mutually exclusive. So I just need to be very honest if I I don't need to do that, thought comes up. Perhaps you don't. Just make sure it's not fueled by ego or resistance to change.
You use the word self-respect.
Mm-hmm.
And just before actually you even share that, I was thinking about humility. If if the chart, creating a chart for myself, develops humility, and what does that lead to? I suppose, if that sounds clear.
Yeah. It certainly can be humbling to keep a chart because you're starting to remove the blind spots that ego had maintained so nicely. So those are going to start to fall away if my chart's really effective. But it's also a relief because the chart becomes the voice for self-respect. So I want to know myself, not not because I want to beat myself up, but I want to see these things in myself I need to change or understand because I really genuinely feel that there is so much that is worthwhile in developing in the self. I really have an interest. This is what I see with weightlifters, or if we take the example in a hospital, they're not afraid to keep a chart. They know it's part of healing. Weightlifters know that this is a part of getting stronger. So this is a part of transformation. They're not dismayed if, oh, there's this happened or I went backwards. They're not dismayed. They want to know why, what happened, what's going on. So if a medical chart's being kept and the stats are getting worse, they're not going to beat themselves up. They're going to want to know why or what's going on. So the chart's very helpful in supporting me in understanding myself and having these sort of release and aha moments. So again, things none of which ego likes, but it's fueled actually by that. All the disciplines are fueled by self-respect or pure feelings towards the self.
And just a side note, when you're talking about humility and self-respect, there's a connection between the two, which is connected to the chart, then, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone sort of thinks of humility almost with humiliation, which is unfortunate because that's actually not the way it goes. So, this idea of there's ego and the opposite is self respect. And when there's that feeling of self worth, then I no longer need to seek that worth outside. And that state of no longer seeking it outside is called humility.
It's interesting when you're sharing because about this isn't about the pandemic. It's not about the masks, but I was thinking about attitude, the intention of why one, for example, keeping a chart or whatever it is, because some of the concerns, I'll just use this example, but not for anyone to get stuck there, that it feels like it's, it is affecting someone's freedom of rights with
Yeah.
the masks. And I'm in the healthcare field, and it doesn't cross my mind at all. All you're thinking about is safety and well-being. So I was thinking about the chart too. If it's all about wanting to understand yourself and benefit yourself, and to be able to um, change when you're stuck in a rut that's probably causing you more sorrow, it kind of feels like that's where the resistance is hitting. It's hitting these things that really matter so much to you, but as you're saying, it creates a numbness. So there's subtle forms of resistance of keeping a chart.
Yeah. I mean, it's an ironic situation that we're kind of in this love hate relationship with self benefit, that I, the soul, want to benefit myself. But this other aspect that develops, we call it body consciousness or arrogance, does not want me to benefit. So now this battle is unleashed. And how will the opposing forces try to block any path of self benefit, including the chart, is to kind of render it meaningless so that I just abandon it.
So just touching on some elements of the chart, in terms of the meaningfulness, well, we'll definitely touch on that. What this can it be very simple, as you mentioned, and still be very beneficial? And maybe just start there so it's not so frightening for everyone.
Mhm. Absolutely. You know, there's two aspects that we always look at in Raj Yoga: what and how. And so I could say, what I want to do is keep a chart. But the art of even developing a chart is an art, is an exercise. Forget about the actual keeping of it, just coming up with one that is meaningful. It doesn't need to be complicated, or maybe it appeals to you to have a very, I see this with weightlifters. There's some that I'm like, wow, that's really, very detailed what they keep. And others, it's check, I showed up today, I'm good to go. And what, it's fine, it's absolutely fine. Just some method of keeping an eye on yourself that, again, really feels powerful and meaningful and you're engaged in. So, the most basic chart that we talk about in Raj Yoga is, what was my consciousness during the day? Did I forget myself during the day? Was I thinking of myself as a soul, an eternal being, or was I wrapped up in all the roles and responsibilities and actions? And the other question was asked is, what was my connection with the Supreme Soul like during the day? Did I use the Supreme Soul during the day? Remember that being, take support. So that's really the bare bones, the most important thing. Everything else is kind of nice pieces that are very personally meaningful, different indicator signs. And I think something that's always very beautiful with the chart, and it has to do a bit with simplicity. I mean, you can expand on it if you want, which also can work, but I think it's very useful when, I know that sometimes in fitness, dance, um, a dancer will discover that there is one particular area that they're not particularly strong in, or that they may have an injury or a mechanical issue. And although they will continue practicing everything, on their own time, they will put a special attention into that one area. So as we're doing this study, you might start to notice that there is one area that's a particular Achilles heel or stumbling block, or you come up, because that's the thing that the resistance forces will not want you to focus on. That's your breakthrough point. And so it's kind of nice just to avoid distraction, to not give in to the resistance, to especially, if I don't look at anything else, especially look at that one thing and chart it over a period of time, to keep it very simple for the sake of not being distracted from something very important.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we can just keep it one thing and get deeper. And what can, I know you talked about just focusing it for a while. Is that what you mean by going deeper?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an example. It can initially look quite superficial, but because the structure of Raj Yoga is this tree and root system, the minute that I figure out something that might be more in the expansion, when I follow it, I can also see that it's connected to something quite important. I saw a beautiful quote today. It was, we will look back in time, the things that we thought were quite small were actually quite big. So, one of the terms that we have in Raj Yoga is very nice. It's speak less, speak softly, speak sweetly. Now that sounds pretty superficial. I'm just controlling my verbal output and my volume, but it's actually connected to something quite deep. So I might go through the day looking, did I speak when it really wasn't necessary to say anything? Or did I speak in a forceful way? So looking at these kinds of things, because that speech is connected deeply to body consciousness, to ego. So I can look at that signal, but in my mind, I know I'm looking at something quite deep. So it's actually reminding me about soul consciousness when I look at it. It does remind me about God consciousness. Why am I trying to prove things or get things from outside through my speech? Am I not getting everything I need through my connection to God? Those who are very content and fulfilled don't talk a lot. So,
So it sounds like, reminds me of, we often hear, how many thoughts do you think you're able to remember that you had in a day?
mm,
And it's thousands. There's thousands and thousands of thoughts. I can't remember, was it 30, 50,000 thoughts actually, but how many can you really track? And when you were sharing about a chart, it's as if you start to see interconnections. It's more than just the thoughts, but seed of where thoughts come from, how they might actually be driving my behaviors and attitudes. So it sounds like it can actually be quite self illuminating,
it
even
is.
scary for some.
Yeah, it could be. But again, I think, it's a journey like any of the other tools that we work with in Raj Yoga. And always there's that attitude of, it is a means of self benefit, to always have that feeling. Yeah, and I think it's very powerful if I can, through the study, recognize one thing within myself that's actually connected to something very deep, but something practical, a practical manifestation of something deep. That's very helpful in terms of what to pay attention to during the day. It's great to have that focus during the day. Okay, today I'm going to go into the day with this particular focus. How do I see other people, as an example?
Mhm. I appreciate this simplicity of just one thing to focus on. May I have the permission to
Mm,
reference your example of the swimming pool?
mm,
Of just trying to come to the swimming pool, if you want to use an example, because I was thinking about the chart. If you can just pick something even simple
mhm.
consistently, it actually is a huge step of progress. And so I was reminded about your swimming example.
You mean trying to get back in the pool? Yeah, yeah. So, um, not sure why. It could have been past birth or in this birth had a funny incident in the ocean, but I do enjoy swimming. I think it was past birth because even prior to the ocean event, I was quite afraid of putting my head underwater. I remember being a toddler, mums and tots, those infant programs. The idea, I think, is that babies are natural, not this baby. I was positive they were drowning me, and I demanded to be withdrawn from the course, which did happen. So I think there was something there, but I was very attracted as well. So I had taken many swimming lessons, all through, got really loved the water, but was quite terrified of it too. It's interesting. So then instant the ocean, and so I wasn't in the water, but again there was such a pull. It's a very soothing sport. So I decided I am going to get back into the water. This is in my early 20s, and I happened to work in a facility with a pool. And yeah, the first item on that chart was just to bring a swimming suit with me to work. Never got in it. Just bring the swimsuit. That went on for a while. And then the next piece was to declare to others that I am trying to get back in the pool. So there's some accountability. And luckily, one of the people that I declared this to was a lifeguard. So they were very helpful. And so the story continued from there. But yeah, I think, Raj Yoga reveals to us the depth of what we're dealing with when we say self transformation. We have a saying, this is not like going to your auntie's home. And so there's a lot of compassion. We have to be firm and disciplined with the self, but very compassionate that we're dealing with quite a deep thing here in terms of self transformation. So that's a very specific balance. And so I really enjoy these two kinds of charts. The medical chart is very compassionate. We are trying to heal the self. But the fitness chart is very boot camp that I need to be disciplined with myself. So both of these feelings or energies are in a chart. I need to be quite disciplined and it helps me that way. But also I need to be very compassionate, understanding the depth of transformation that I am putting myself through. And so, incremental change is massive when we're talking about spirituality. And if I have expectations, then I will become disheartened and abandon the chart. But if I have an appreciation of, wow, this is a very profound change, very deep, deep things, attachments I'm dealing with. So I need to be firm, but very compassionate.
Sounds like also one of the things that ego likes to do is make something very complicated and elaborate and make it seem like uh, there could be a lot of success. But this is to even choose to keep it simple to begin with, or maybe even constantly throughout one's study, that there would be maybe trading off a bit of quantity, but meaningfulness and quality.
Yeah, I think the meaningfulness is so, so critical. That as you observe yourself, because you're kind of your own teacher in this study, you have to kind of set your little daily homework assignments and check up on yourself. And that's what the chart helps us to do, to assess at the end of the day, how did my assignment go today that I gave myself? And so I'm hopefully giving myself meaningful assignments. If I'm in math class and the math teacher gives me an English essay to write, that doesn't make any sense in terms of what. So they are meaningful assignments that are connected to objectives or attainments that are meaningful to me. So if self respect is meaningful to me, I will pay attention. What activities do I engage in that nurture self respect in the day? And what activities do I engage in that diminish self respect? I want to pay attention to those activities. So it's a very simple chart and it's very personal. So it probably won't be meaningful to somebody else. But it's really about developing a relationship, a very loving relationship with the self. That I really want to move towards that objective that's meaningful to me. So it's going to also help my meditations. I always find when I have a chart that perhaps isn't that great, a mark, but there was a lot of realization. I have a great meditation the next morning. Fantastic. So this is about a lot of self-respect, self-love, self-benefit. It's between you and yourself. If you want to give yourself 100% on your chart for the sake of the show, that's great. But this is really between you and yourself, you helping yourself.
It's amazing when you were sharing that you may not have a great chart, but you would have realizations. And
Mhm.
both June and I were listening to a sharing this evening um, about someone who had quite a few little arguments in the day, and but she had so many realizations that one wouldn't even imagine that even keeping a chart that finding that you're perhaps maybe not on par can actually even help benefit yourself if you're honest about it.
Absolutely. This really is again about moving from self deception, self sabotage to self benefit and clarity around the self. And whatever I see, again, if I'm in a hospital and certain signs are showing up in my vitals, I want to know what's behind that. So I say, oh, your heart rate's, your blood pressure's low, you're a failure. Like, that's not useful. Why is it low? So again, if I find I'm repeatedly presenting certain behavior in the day, it's not just, yeah, check. But it's no, actually, I did do that behavior again today, and I want to know what is going on. So I use the mirror of knowledge And it helps me to see, okay, what is that behavior? What's behind it? What's the seed? Okay, tomorrow I'm going to pay attention to that. So it's quite useful in revealing information to the self of what I need to pay attention to. Attention is everything.
And do you find that it's quite like fulfilling in itself to be increasingly self-directed then, because of you have a focus the next day, you have a chance to see inside yourself that something that needs a bit more attention, versus sort of walking into the day without really, kind of ill prepared, I suppose.
Or unstructured. It's interesting. The chart is one of many tools in different disciplines. Not all fitness people keep a chart, but I've noticed the ones who do, it comes with a profile, and it is around self-efficacy or being self-directed, self-discipline. I had an interesting conversation with a soul today, and it's certainly relevant to these times, because for many, their structure is gone, so they now have the expanse of the day in front of them, even if they work from home, and they're going to have to they're going to have to structure their day, like have a plan, and knowing themselves. So we were sitting there, and I was asking her, so how often are you coming in to do your workouts? And she said, well, it's usually 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. And she says, but sometimes, I plan to come in and it just doesn't happen. She says, I need to have developed some kind of structure for myself, whether it's accountability to someone or. So it's great that she knows herself and she created this structure to sustain herself, because she knows what will happen if she does not work out. And so also, so these are why we have these disciplines, isn't to drive us mad or trap us or onerous, or it's acknowledging that we want to create some kind of structure. The funny, but it's really in my hands. It's going to demand that I be a little bit self-directed, but creating some kind of structure, some kind of accountability. So this is obviously skills for life.
There's so many practical questions that come to mind, but I think we're going to have to carry them into the next week's session. So perhaps maybe Judy can help close with a few thoughts.
And as always, if you have any thoughts or questions, please do share. I'm really open to hearing and would appreciate. Sitting quietly, I go inside, as if withdrawing into my own study place inside, a quiet place where I can fully engage in studying the most important subject in my life, myself. And at the foundation of every powerful study, there is a deep love for the subject matter, a deep interest to learn. And when the subject matter is the self, this is especially important. A deep love for the self, an interest to learn, to really understand myself as a soul, as a child of God. I am intrinsically good. This understanding is the foundation of my study. And my entire focus is on how to draw out that true state. What do I need to focus on? What do I need to unlock? What do I need to highlight? What do I need to let go of? As I move along, charting my course, whatever I discover and can incorporate into my journey will move me closer and closer to my destination of complete healing, returning to my highest potential. Om Shanti.
Thank you for joining us this evening. And as Judy mentioned, please send emails to us. You're always more than welcome to type in the chat box if you have questions. And one of the thoughts that came, if you have challenges with the charts as well, please feel free to send your comments, again, your questions, if there's anything that you would like to be addressed for the next session for part 2, charting my progress. So I'll pass it off to Judy to let us know what upcoming sessions are. Thank you for joining.
So we do have a couple of things happening this weekend. Inner Fitness is a weekly event on the Zoom platform, hour-long, exploring some aspect of spirituality that is inspired by its counterpart in physical fitness. So that's Inner Fitness. I believe Energized is the theme this weekend, 2 to 3 p.m. Details are on our website. We also have, just before that, a workshop session on the God experience, again on Zoom from 12 to 1:30, and that, I believe, is a registration through Eventbrite. So again, you can check our website. Sunday evening, we have drop-in meditation, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Any other details, you can find it all on our website, or feel free to email us if you have any questions. Thank you so much for joining this evening. Om Shanti.